Yo, so here on Polite Commentary, I listen to and watch quite a bit of progressive media, independent media, and it ranges across quite a bit of channels. I don't get all my information from one or two sources. I listen to like at least 10 to 15 different channels, and not just somebody who wants to talk on certain issues or political philosophies or social philosophies. I also want to talk about, as a consumer of media, what I find appealing or unappealing about certain channels. And if they take my feedback to heart, great. If not, whatever. These are just my opinions. But as somebody who wants to have his own successful channel, and I think I can say with good faith that if it's not malicious, I could probably handle most feedback, maybe even apply it. That's what the purpose of this is. So what's probably going to be the first channel of this series, especially on the heels of a midterm election. I'm recording this on November 19th. I'm going to talk about a channel that I really only listen to or watch during election season. Other than that, I don't subscribe to him. His name, it's Let's Talk Elections. I think the guy's name is Ethan. He's a college student. And I went through and listened to some of his post-election commentary just to make sure I could give him a fair shake. And yeah, my main issue is that he fell for the red wave narrative also. I didn't fall for it. I was, of course, on pins and needles with certain races, but I largely believed that the red wave was going to be a farce and that this particular midterm was going to be a lot different and historic. And it was. So I won't claim I have a perfect prediction pattern or history record, but I am kind of empowered and emboldened right now based on, as somebody with like maybe my own political ambitions in the future, that at least for this particular midterm cycle, I kind of had my finger on the pulse and would like to learn from other people's mistakes. And the 2 weeks leading up to the election, I decided to stop following Ethan's channel because it was starting to get a little too heavy on focusing on polls, and insurgence of partisan polls, which polls can be weaponized. You can ask bad questions. You can sample bad populations. Or maybe I should phrase that differently. You can pick bad sampling populations, like targeting them, misrepresent the actual electorate. And yeah, I think that when he talks about data and trends and stuff, for the most part, he does a pretty good job. He seems pretty smart for his age, but I also think he's really immature and inexperienced at the actual political side of discussing politics. So I just couldn't stomach it. Not because I don't like the result, but just because I just knew it wasn't going to happen. When he was posting videos, Senator Dr. Oz or Governor Carrie Lake, I'm like, dude, they're not going to win. You've got this so wrong. And I was able to say that with like 95% certainty. And I think he tries a little too hard to sound neutral or be neutral at times, and he ends up alienating people. If he's trying to be neutral and just trying to be a straight shooter, I can certainly respect that, but I think he falls into that trap of thinking, well, if I just play it down the middle, that'll be the perfect split between the extremes of both sides. That's not how it works. You split the difference between the extremes of either side, the population lands center left. So the average between the left and the right isn't the center. When one side goes far more off to the extreme, the center leans more to the other side, which is left. So I don't think Ethan knows his audience that well because of that. And I found that his over-reliance on polls, let alone bad polling, and aggregate sites like 538 or Real Clear Politics, which were both a little flawed, and definitely got it wrong. Definitely underestimated Democrats. And I'd been saying for weeks that they are polling likely voters, not unlikely voters. The unlikely voters are going to be the ones that determine this. And it wasn't my original thoughts that said this. It was people like Bo, the fifth column. It was data analysts. I forget their names, but they were like sampling, or they were like talking about early vote batches and analyzing the data within it and going, youth turnout's going to be quite high this year, and it's definitely going to favor Democrats. And that's going to play a huge role in there not being a red wave. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm not claiming that I originated these thoughts. I probably had a feeling based on my own thoughts about Roe being overturned, or not conventional wisdom like it's the economy stupid and other things like the youth doesn't vote. All that stuff fucking died. And I called it, and it was backed up by other people who also called it. So, just the fact that in his final predictions, he had Pennsylvania going to Oz. That was his worst take. In one of his videos, he did say he got it wrong, but I think he tried to put too much of the blame on aggregate sites instead of maybe his own misunderstanding of politics. He did correctly change his prediction on the Nevada Senate side. I told him for weeks, I'm like, dude, Laxalt's not going to win. It's going to be close. It's going to be within a point, which it was. I think Cortez Masto ultimately won by just barely a point. But the Senate and the governor races are going to be different. Conventional wisdom doesn't apply there either. The Hispanic woman outperformed the white guy. And Sisolak lost barely by like 1.5 to Lombardo. And I just learned this, but Nevada mostly has Republican governors. So I'm glad we at least had Sisolak during the pandemic. But yeah, him thinking Kari Lake was going to win, even though that was probably the most watched, tightly contested race, I was certainly a little nervous about watching it. But I ultimately knew that if Mark Kelly was going to win by quite a bit, that he would carry Katie Hobbs across the finish line, which is what happened. He also wrongly predicted the Wisconsin governor's race. I had said that in terms of like competitive races, outside of Pennsylvania, that Wisconsin would have been the most likely pickup, but I still unfortunately thought that Ron Johnson would barely win, which he did, but they would elect a Democratic governor. So they did the opposite of Nevada, where they split the ticket, but it went the other way. So I'm not here to crap on Ethan for getting some of his predictions wrong, but it's for the reasons why he made those predictions. And I think just the immaturity or lack of experience or understanding of the electorate, voting patterns, population shifts, electoral shifts, which he does talk about in other videos. He does talk about trends and how certain states are heading in a certain direction. Like, yeah, Democrats didn't win Ohio, but Ohio shifted 2.5 points on the Senate side. So certain states are still trending in a certain direction, but long term, it's good for Democrats. And the fact that they only lost the House by a couple seats, or under 10, is more of a repudiation against Republicans, because they were only able to do that mostly because of gerrymandering. Democrats could have staved that off by having better candidates in New York and maybe in a couple of other areas. And, you know, Pat Maloney up in New York definitely fucked that up. Probably cost us a couple of seats. Democrats probably still could have kept the House if their ground game in certain areas had been better. A lot of these races were very tight, and that's actually more of a rejection of the Republicans than an indictment against Democrats or a referendum. So anyway, all this to say, I found it hard to continue listening to him and support him. It wasn't just the fatigue of being in the middle of an election season that was like tightly contested, but it was just the fact that he had fallen for that whole red wave narrative. It wasn't wish casting. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, nah, dude, I just have a strong feeling that this is not going to happen. And yeah, beyond that, what was once a B- channel, I'd probably give like a C now. I think his videos are too long. They're usually like 15 minutes. They should be like maybe 10 at the most. He uses too many. Look at me struggling with my own presentation now. Transition phrases like looking back or fast forward, or I think he could be a lot more concise with his messaging and his presentation style. He talks way too fast, which if you have a higher voice like he does, it's really annoying. You can get away with talking faster, in my opinion, if you have a deeper voice. So his voice is a little grating to listen to. And just in terms of presentation, if you just talk a little slower, that'd mean a lot. If you can move your phone away from the mic, it's kind of unprofessional that you appear to have this nice setup, but your audio levels suck. Having your phone vibrating every 5-10 seconds near the mic is hard on the ears, especially if you're a headphone listener. And you need to update your intro and outro language. The whole, hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Just structurally, rhetorically, that sentence doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm being kind of nitpicky there. And then you need to link your stuff in the description box. You do the same copy and paste stuff every single time, but you don't actually link the sites that you use that would be helpful for people that want to try to read what you're looking at, especially if it's like audio listeners. But overall, he seems like a smart kid. He probably has a bright future ahead of him. He seems like a decent person. And the 30% of tangible material I'm able to usually derive from his videos make it worth it to listen to him sometimes. But other than that, I usually don't subscribe to him. And his attempt to be neutral seems forced at times, and he ends up alienating people. You don't need to have an outright bias like somebody like me, but maybe stop saying President Trump all the time. The guy's not the president anymore. You're not really making anybody happy by referring to him like that. And a lot of the conventional wisdom about like split ticket voting or being a check on certain branches of government, not as apparent as you might think it is based on voting patterns. I know you might say like, oh, well, certain governors or certain senators outperformed their counterparts by quite a bit, so sometimes people do split ticket voting. It might not necessarily be for the reasons you think, but I just think he needs to have a bit more experience before he talks on certain issues. I mean, you can do it all you want, but you'll have people who have opinions about any of your opinions being vapid. But otherwise, your ability to analyze certain elections and trends and behaviors, pretty solid for the most part. So worth checking the channel out, but I think overall it needs to be restructured and needs to be a little less clickbaity, and the messaging could be more concise. So I give his channel at worst a C, at best a B-.